Hi there, my name is Sam and welcome to our Hammer's Art Studio Paint Along tutorial video. Today we will be doing this lovely Lavender Fields scented paint event. We've got some really neat paint colors here today. We've got a whole lot of them, so make sure that we follow along pretty well. You'll be able to pause and fast forward or rewind as you'd like. Today, I'm going to start off with going over all of our supplies that we'll be needing for our class today. So to begin with, we would like to pull out some kind of paper plate or wax paper, something that has a little bit of a waxy surface so that our paint won't absorb into it. If you have a regular plastic palette at home, that works well too, but we like to use paper plates. They're recyclable and reusable, right? So awesome. We've got our paper plate. We're going to need a cup of water for rinsing our brushes when we get to that point. We will need several different kinds of brushes today. I've got my background wash brush. We're going to need our small detail brush. And we're going to use a flat or angle brush, whichever one that you have, as well as this medium-sized round brush. So to get started, we'll also need a rag or a paper towel, whichever one that you have, to dry our brushes off when we get there as well. There's no tracer in this video today. We will be freehanding our butterfly in, so watch very carefully when we get to that part. It might be a little bit tricky, but it's really fun. So we'll get started right away. So the first two colors that we're going to pull out, the first three colors we're going to use today is our pink, our cerulean blue, and our titanium white. And we're gonna start with our large background brush. So we can get started right now. I'm going to go in with just some white to begin with. It's going to be a little bit tricky to see because obviously your canvas is white and the paint is white. This is just going to help us prime the background. As you can see behind me, the sky is really nice and light. There's some pink and purple and blue hues in it along with our clouds. By adding the white first, it's going to make sure that the color, as you can see on my palette, it's really bright, and we want to save that for when we go in to do our pink flowers and our blue flowers. So obviously we're not going to be using all of our pink and our blue today to begin with in the background. We'll end up using some later on. So just make sure you kind of separate maybe another section of it so that when we do a little bit of mixing, that the colors won't blend on your palette. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. This is a really nice, quick and loose background. You really don't need to take too much time to get it worked in. We want it to dry pretty quickly so that we can start working on our flowers. If it's a little bit damp still when we go in to do our flowers, that's okay. We're going to need to blend a little bit of white and a little bit of the other colors in with, especially with our pink flowers. So if the background's a little bit wet, that's not a big deal. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to try to keep my direction diagonal and up from the bottom left to the top right. But I'm going to start up in the top left just to make it easy for me. So I'm going to very quickly start filling it in, and as you can see, I'm going the opposite direction than I just said, but that's just to spread out some of that extra paint across the canvas. We don't want it to sit on there too thick. So if you feel like it looks really blobby, really thick on your canvas, go ahead and pull it one direction and then smooth it out the other way. We want to do this really quickly so it doesn't start to dry up on us. We don't need to come down all the way to the bottom of the canvas. As you can see, we've got a whole bunch of grass to add in. So we don't need to fill that all in. We can do that with our green. I know you can't really see what I'm doing right now, but I promise you it's working. We do want to come a little bit lower on our right side here. As you can see, the grass doesn't come up all the way on that side. That seems like it's just about good to me. Our next color we're going to jump into is our blue. So without cleaning my brush off, I'm going to go ahead and take just a little bit of blue on the end. And I'm gonna make a couple of little dots across the canvas. This will just help to make sure that we don't end up, as I was saying before, with a really dark blue streak going through the middle of our canvas. So I'm going to just take this blue in a couple of areas, maybe put a little more up here since it's bluer up near the top. And now I'm going to go ahead and start blending and streaking that out. If you feel the brush pulling on your canvas a little bit, if you feel some tension there, go ahead and take a little extra white. Again, with the white, we don't want to use it all up and get it all contaminated with other colors, because we will need a little bit of that later for the butterfly and for some of the flowers. Nice and quick, really nice and easy background. You want to try to make sure, you might notice as you're filling, that there's little white dots that kind of stay in the canvas. That's where the canvas hasn't gotten completely filled in yet. So we want to make sure that we're filling that in, going just back and forth over it. I'm going to do my little sideways trick again to kind of just help get some of these lines a little bit less obvious. Take a little extra white. Streak that back in. Excellent. Now I'm going to start coming back over here. I don't want my dots to start drying out on me. I'm going to streak them out this way. Take some more white on my brush. It looks kind of like a mess right now, but it's going to look really nice in a couple of minutes. I want to make sure we're coming all the way up to the top here. Nice and loose. Excellent. Starting to look really nice and blendy, nice and flowing. But we don't want to overblend, because we do want these streaks to be pretty apparent in the sky throughout our painting. There we go. Now it's time to move on to our pink. Now you'll notice that it looks a little bit purple in the background. The reason that we're not using our actual purple paint color is because we can make that same light purple by adding a little bit of pink in with our light blue and our white here. So we're just gonna take a little bit, same idea, we just wanna dot it in where you think it'll look really nice, maybe some over here. I might take a little bit of extra white on my brush just to make sure it doesn't turn too purple. Some over here, maybe a little bit up in this corner. Now, before we go to blend in, I do want you guys to take your rag or your paper towel and just dry your brush off very carefully. We don't need to wash it. We just want to get some of that extra paint off so that when we go in with our white, it won't be too pink. So we can go ahead and start streaking. We do want to blend this out a little bit so we don't end up with fuzzy edges. It'll just look nicer. If you want yours to be a little bit more purple, you could take a little extra blue on your brush. I'm going to leave mine a little bit more pink. Our example behind me has a little bit more purple in it, but I think it'll be nice to have a little bit of a different painting. That's the awesome thing about painting, is you can follow right along and make it exactly like ours, or you can do it the way that you like and sort of make it your own. That's what creativity is all about, right? Excellent. So I'm going to add just a little bit more down here, just to kind of give a nice little purple hue right along the edge of the canvas. And there we go. We are going to let this dry for a little while before we add the grass. But while it's drying, we can, as I said before, go ahead and start working on some of our flowers. So for the purple ones, let's start with the purple ones, and you're going to notice that the purple paint is scented like lavender, which is a really relaxing essential oil. So hopefully you'll be able to take a nice breather before we do the purples. You can give your paint a little whiff, probably do the wafting trick rather than sticking your nose right in your paint. You don't want to end up with a big purple nose. Yeah, it smells really nice. So for these, I was right. Sometimes I misspeak and I sound silly, but that was correct that time. We're going to use our 2 small round brushes. Now, if you have the purple set that we have been selling in the studio, you'll notice that there is an even larger brush. We're not going to use that today. I think it's just going to be a little bit too cumbersome, a little bit too large. So we're just going to set that one to the side, but we will be using both of these round brushes. I'm going to start with my larger brush, and we can go right ahead into the purple. There will be a little bit of white mixed in, but we'll see if we can't use some of the background color that's already there. So I'm going to go ahead and work my way down. I think it'll just be easier. Our brains work a little bit better going left to right. That's how we read, that's how we write. So might as well keep painting like that as well. So I'm going to start off with my first flower. This one is going to be pretty high up, not quite all the way at the top of the canvas as you can see, but probably about 4.5, 5 inches down is where the top of the flower will start. So we can go ahead and just start kind of tapping and very gently, I don't really know what this motion is called, going in half circles, I guess. And that'll help get the base of the flower in. Now, if you can see behind me, the edges of the flower, especially on the purple one, are a little bit wispier. It makes it look just a little bit more whimsical, like the wind's catching it. So we will be adding that in. That's why we need our little brush. And we'll also use the little brush for some of the smaller flowers, especially the blue ones. This one might get a little bit too large. So we can go ahead and get started. I'm going to just go ahead and put some purple in. Wherever I start is where our flower is gonna go. So you'll notice it's starting to lighten up a little bit as it blends with our blue and our pink and our white in the background. You might notice that there's some blue appearing on your brush. So just go ahead and dry it off on your rag and go back in with your dark purple again. And you can start to shape this flower. Now you can see mine is sort of just a blob right now. We want it skinnier near the top and a little bit wider and rounder near the bottom. So I'm going to start just rounding the edges a little bit so I don't end up with a big old blob on my canvas. When you see me put my brush down onto the table, probably means I am wiping it off on my rag. There we go. Nice and impressionistic, really nice and quick. We can set this brush aside. You can stick it in your water for now if you'd like. If you're worried about your brush getting, your paint drying on your brush and it getting crusty, I'm just gonna set mine to the side and just go back to it pretty quickly. If you do stick it in your water, just make sure you dry it really, really well before you use it again. Acrylic paint, which is what we're using today, is water soluble, which means that it dissolves in water, which makes it really easy to clean, but it makes it a little bit tricky if you try to use it right after you've got it in your water. If you put a brush that's wet on your canvas, you could end up with some drips and stains running down your whole canvas, which is an interesting technique, but not something we want to do today. So very carefully, I'm going to pull my canvas a little bit closer to me. If you're at home and you would prefer to lay it flat on the table for this next part, you can totally do that. And I'm just going to rest my hand up here so I don't touch the canvas and very carefully start pulling some little wisps off the side. I'm kind of starting in the middle and pulling it out. You don't want to start too far in. You could add some little textures inside as well. You notice that maybe some of the purple is pulling off and it's revealing some of the blue underneath. That's okay, it makes it look even more artistic. I am going to put my little brush in my water for now. I think for the next few steps, I'm gonna go ahead and just add in the last 3 flowers and then go back and add the little fuzzy edges afterwards. That'll give it some time to dry up a little bit and start settling into our canvas. The next flower is a little bit more straight up in the air. It's not leaning over to the left quite so far. And it's probably about 2 inches away from the first one and about a ½ an inch lower. So we can go ahead and add that in. And I'm already noticing my canvas is starting to dry up more quickly. So I might want to take a tiny touch of white, literally just the tiniest little touch of white to add in, just to give it a little bit of a nice lighter hue. Something that happens with acrylic paint is it starts out lighter than it will dry. I don't really know the reason for that, probably something to do with the chemical compound of the paint, but it will dry a little bit darker. So if you feel like it's looking really dark on your canvas already, maybe add a little bit of white, because like I said, it will dry even darker. You can see I've got my brush upside down right now, and that just makes it easier to kind of add some little textures right along the edge there. Perfect. I'm gonna do my next one. This one's a little bit larger. So I'm gonna come right to about here. Now we do wanna stay up above our white down here. That way we don't have to worry about covering it up with our grass, covering our flowers with our grass, right? So this one, we'll start right about here. And I think I'm going to just shape it out first and then fill it in. That way I know exactly how large it's going to be. Same idea, might want to take just a little tiny bit of white, give it a little bit of a lighter hue. This is such a great painting because we don't have to wait too long for it to dry up. Sometimes, especially when we're in the studio, a lot of our friends know that we'll have a snack time, and that really just covers up the time for our paintings to dry. If you do find when we jump into the grass that the background's still a little bit too wet right along the bottom, it shouldn't be, but if it is, you can go ahead and take a little break as well. You can pause the video, go grab a snack, come back when it's dry and finish it up. The awesome thing about acrylic paint is it does dry pretty quickly compared to other kinds of paint. Watercolor dries very, very quickly, and oil paint sometimes can take a couple of weeks to dry completely, which is really wild. Acrylic paint's a lot easier. Now this flower down here is quite a bit lighter, but I think I've got enough white still that's wet in my background that I can use that to my advantage. Looks like I can, nice. Excellent, all right. So our purple flowers are basically finished. We do need to go back in with our little brush, so I'm gonna pull that out of my water, give it a good dry on my rag, and go in with my purple. Maybe a little bit of white too, just to keep it a little lighter. And start doing the same thing that we did with the first one, just kind of very carefully start pulling some little wisps off the edge. If this is feeling a little bit tricky, don't worry, we only have to do this 2 more times. There aren't little wisps on the pink or the blue flowers. My favorite part about spring are the flowers and the leaves coming out, but my least favorite part is the pollen that they make. I have pretty bad spring allergies, so even though it's one of my favorite seasons, that part I don't really like about it. But it's okay. It's nice to feel some warmth after the winter and get back outside. There we go. Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and stick my brush back in my water, and I'm going to pull out the round one that we were using again. We do want to make sure it's nice and clean for when we do our pink flowers. Now with our pink flowers, they might end up getting a little bit blended. As you can see with this one, it's pretty nice and purple. It's kind of a magenta color. So if you want to add a little bit of extra purple in there, that's totally up to you. I think I'm going to stick to just pink and white for this one. There might be a little bit of purple added in. But as I said before, it's the great thing about an impressionistic painting like this. With flowers, they can really be any color you'd like. All right, excellent. I made kind of a bubblegummy color. Like I said before, it will dry darker. So if it feels like you think that's too bubblegummy for you, you can make it a little darker, but as I said, it will dry quite a bit darker. So I'm going to go ahead, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pink flowers to fill in. So I'm gonna just go through all of them. We might end up downsizing our brush when we get to some of the smaller ones here, but I'll let you know. You'll notice that this first one over here, I'm gonna start on the left again and work my way right. It is going off of the canvas a little bit. That makes it a little bit more interesting when you take a photograph of something. Generally, you want to have something over on the left side, something over on the right side, and kind of leave one of the areas a little bit blank. That's called negative space, and it just makes the photograph or the picture or the drawing a little bit more interesting for whoever is looking at it. So we're gonna add in our first pink flower. Now, this is where it does get a little bit tricky and you might want to use some more white. It will start to blend a little bit with your blue in the background if it's not completely dry, which is okay. It'll turn more of that purpley color, which might end up looking really, really nice anyways. If it's really frustrating you that it's blending, what you can do is come back in a little bit and add a second coat right over your first one. I kind of like that it blends a little bit with the background. I think it makes it look a little bit more artistic. A great tip for every artist is that you never admit your mistakes. We call them happy accidents in art. What that means is that if there's a part of your painting that you're not entirely proud of, and someone says, wow, I really love what you did right there with that pink flower, and you say, oh yeah, you know, well, it was an accident, but never say that. You don't wanna admit when you were wrong, because if someone likes it, just say, oh yeah, you know, I thought really long and hard about that and decided to go this way. It's not lying, it's just sort of bending the truth a little bit, right? It makes you seem like a more confident artist, which is really important. So I'm going to start with my next flower, which is right below this first one. It's a little bit smaller, and it kind of just sits right on the edge here. There we go. Pretty easy. Can keep going. I'm going to add my next one right below, kind of in between our two purple ones here. I'm gonna take a little extra white in there, give it some nice little fluff. Nice. And I might make it a little bit longer and a little skinnier. But I kind of like that it's a little bit rounder than in our example. It makes it look a little bit fuller. Add my last two in here. These are nice and skinny, so if you feel the need to, you can go ahead and use your little brush again. I'm gonna stick with this one, I think. Now with this one, I do want to take a little bit of extra purple on my brush. It'll just add some nice little hues into the pink and make it a little different than the other ones. Because no flowers are really exactly identical, right? It just gives it a little bit more something. And our last pink one, really nice and tiny, right in here. As I said with the last one, you can downsize to your small round brush if you feel like this is a little bit too tricky with the bigger one. Awesome. I'm gonna aim my canvas back at you guys so you can see. It looks a little bit weird right now. We don't have any of our stems in quite yet, but that's okay. We're gonna go ahead and pull out our skinny brush again. This will just make it a little easier to go in and do some of the blue. Now with the blue, you will notice there is one in the grass. So to do that, we're going to wait until after we've added the grass in, and we can go ahead and add that in afterwards. But we can add our other two. And you can add more if you'd like. You can put some more maybe up higher. It's really up to you where you want to add these in. We don't want to add any white to this, and if anything, we could add a little bit of purple. That way it doesn't end up blending in with our sky. We do want to be able to see right where these flowers are, because they're really pretty. This cerulean blue is maybe my favorite color. I think it might be. It's a really pretty bright blue. But I am going to add just a touch of purple into it here and there to give it some shadows. And one here. And you know what? I think just for the fun of it, I'm going to add a fourth one in, even though this is only our third, right? But I think I will. I think I'll add another one in. Maybe, well, we have to think about it because where our stems go, we want to try not to cover up the blossoms of our other flowers. So in order to do that, we just have to kind of imagine this one's going to come down like this. This one might come down like that. So maybe I'll just put it right on the edge. I think I will. Just like this. Kind of coming off the edge of it. It's peeking in from somewhere else. There we go. I like that. Nice. Perfect. So now we're going to dry our brushes off, get them nice and clean, dry them off, and we'll start working on some grass. All right. So I'm going to switch palettes. You can as well, or if you have some room. Actually, I think I've got enough room right there for my green. So you can go ahead and pull that out. Now for the green, there is going to be a little bit of blue and a little bit of our, it's called yellow ochre, but our yellowish brown color, kind of mustard color. That's just going to help give some highlights. We don't want to use too much white because it'll make it too pale. I can get our yellow out. There we go. Excellent. So I'm going to use my flat brush. If you have an angle brush, that's even easier. And you can also use, I'll pull out the skinny brush as well, because I think that'll help us get some of those finer points. So we can go ahead and get some green on the brush. I'm just gonna start with some regular green. And you know what? I'm gonna change my mind. I'm gonna do a little switcheroo. We're gonna set this to the side for a second. We are gonna cheat. It's not cheating, it's just training. Training wheels, right? Helpful. We're gonna take our big brush out of our water. We're gonna get it really, really, really nice and dry. Get all the white out of it, all the blue and all the pink out of there. We're gonna fill in with some green first to save us some time. Could take forever to go in and individually add each one of those brush strokes. This way we'll have a nice base, and then we can go in and add our details once it's filled. So I'm just gonna go right across the bottom. Now, I'm starting at the bottom because I don't wanna come up too high. I don't wanna accidentally start streaking back and forth right through the flowers. That would be a shame. You have to go back, wait for it to dry, start over with the flowers, probably put some white there. This is a whole mess. So I'm starting down low, so I know exactly where I need to put my paint. I'm just filling. Doesn't have to be a very thick coat. You can kind of see I'm spraying all that paint out. I might do my little trick to pull it up a little bit, keeping in mind where my blue is, my sky is. And I'm just going to kind of very impressionistically fill this area in. This will give it some texture, some detail too. That'll be kind of nice to play around with afterwards. We want to try to fill in quite a bit of those white spaces that we left at the bottom of the canvas. Just kind of smoothing it out just a little bit. And there is our base. So what we're gonna do now is go ahead, and you can kind of see I did accidentally come up a little bit high, but that's all right. We'll add some nice little textured flowers in there afterwards. Now we can take our angle brush or our flat small brush, and I'm gonna take just a little bit of cerulean on there. I'm gonna mix it together, and it's gonna make kind of a nice little teal color. And that's the first one I'm going to start with, and just add some nice streaks right up like this. You can see how it's starting to kind of look a little bit like grass. I'm coming up above the line a little, being careful to not come into the flowers too much. If I can, excellent. Now I'm just going to take a little bit more blue and see if I can't add some texture down here. Just got blue on my brush by itself, since we already have plenty of green on here. Coming right along the top here to kind of give some extra grass, and then pulling it down a little bit more. This is a great process. It's kind of interesting. What we're doing is actually moving around the paint that we already have on the canvas. We're making our own highlights from just pulling some of that paint around. We're adding shadows where the paint kind of piles up a little bit around our brush. I'm going to take a little bit more green as mine is starting to dry out a little. It's starting to look pretty interesting. I actually really like this. This is a little bit different of a technique than I used to fill in the sample behind me, I did take my time and went brush stroke by brush stroke by brush stroke to fill it all in. It came out really nice, but it took me quite a long time. I'm saving us a little time. To make it any darker, if you'd like to, this is a special trick. I've got a little bit of purple on my brush. We don't want to use any of our black. Black actually really mutes a color. It really takes away the vibrance. Often we don't want to mix purple and green together because it makes brown. But in this case, it's actually what we want to do to make our dark hue in there. It makes kind of this really interesting murky green. And that just helps to have a little bit of some darker blades of grass. It makes it look a little bit more like shadows. So I'm going to mix up a little bit more of that. And then I'll wash my brush off when I'm finished before we use a little bit of our yellow. We don't want to use all of our yellow because it's a little bit tricky to see, but we've got some nice little yellow dots. And those are like cute little plants, little smaller flowers that we're going to need to add in as well, just to make our painting look completely finished. Here we go, I've got some of my darker lines coming in. You can maybe make some of your grass grow the opposite direction. Awesome, I think that looks pretty good for now. So I am gonna wash my brush off. Go in with a little bit of yellow, but I think I'm gonna use my little bitty brush to do this next trick. I'm gonna take some of our yellow ochre and just very carefully, now I'm picking up quite a bit of green on there, so we will need to keep going back and getting more paint, but that's all right. This will just add some really interesting highlights. It's a little tricky to see on the camera, but you will notice that it's working, hopefully, for you at home. It might blend a little bit, but that's okay. We just want it to kind of accent some of the leaves, grass, but I don't know what they're called. Yes, they're grass. They're grass. It's grass. I think that's good. Not too much, like I said. So we're gonna put our brushes back in the water, except for our medium-sized round brush. We do want to get that nice and clean. I still have some purple on mine, it looks like, so I'm gonna get that really, really, really nice and clean. And now we're gonna add in our butterfly wings. We're gonna wait a little bit for the black until we're more finished with our painting, but we're gonna start with the wings. Now, as I said before, we wanna try to make sure that our white is nice and clean. If not a huge deal, as long as there's enough that it'll show up in your background. If it picks up a little bit of the hue from the background, some of the pink and the blue, that's quite all right. It is, the butterfly that we made here is kind of iridescent. It's kind of translucent, maybe a little bit see-through, very delicate. So you can kind of see the background through it. That's okay. I'm gonna pick a good spot for it. Probably right in between, right on top of this pink line right here. So I'd like everyone to watch really closely, and then you can do it yourself. I just wanna make sure everyone gets this correct because it's a little bit difficult. We are going to start with the top wing that is closest to us. So what I'm going to do is take my brush and sweep it like this. That's the top part of the wing. Now I'm gonna sweep it down like this, and maybe pull up too, just to make sure I don't end up with extra paint coming around. And fill it in the same direction so that it's nice and smooth. You can put an extra thick coat on there so that it's really textured, or you can do it nice and thin. I'm gonna try to make this a little bit more pointed. There we go. Excellent. Now I'm going to do the second part of that wing. So I'm gonna pull down from the middle here. Oops, my easel moved on me. Let's make sure that doesn't happen again. I don't want to end up with a white line right across my whole canvas. So I'm gonna take it and swoop it up and then start swooping down. And it's got a little wing, well, it is a wing, right? But it's got a little tip right at the end of the wing where it kind of swoops right up. So we wanna make sure that's nice and round, right around like this. And then whoop, whoop, little swoop, like that. Now we're gonna close it off by wrapping it down. And rather than swooping the other direction, we're just gonna finish it. It kind of looks like a little paisley pattern. I'm leaving mine kind of textured. I think it'll make it, when it dries, those clumps of paint will solidify and they'll make little ridges, and it's a little bit interesting. Now I'm gonna do my other wing on the back. You might wanna take just a touch of purple. Remember, touch, touch, touch of purple. That'll just darken it just enough that you can tell it's the back wing. Because it's behind, it might be a little bit shadowed by the front wing, that kind of idea. Just gives it a little bit of depth, a little bit more depth. I'm gonna finish that wing off like this. Perfect. So there's our butterfly wings. As I said before, we'll take the black out in a little bit. Black is a very, it's a very dark color, obviously, but it stains paints really, really easily. And if we accidentally get it, even just on our hand, and we go in and smear our canvas by mistake, it's really difficult to get the black out. If we did something like that with white, white is a very manipulable color. You can really, really change it just like that. Black isn't quite the same. So we're just gonna leave that in the bag for now. And I'm gonna go back to my little brush, a little tiny detail brush, and some green, and we're gonna add in our stems. I need a little bit more. I used quite a bit when I made that darker green, which we might need anyways. I think I'm gonna use some of that darker green. These colors together, purple and green, always remind me of the Hulk. I don't know why. But now, let's see. I'm going to start, I'll start left to right again. Might as well keep with the trend. So this one, we don't really need a stem unless you want to add one in. Maybe I'll just put a little snaky one that kind of goes right off the edge of the canvas. But what we want to do is start right at the base of our flower and very carefully pull the line down so that it meets with our grass. I'm going to keep it nice and skinny if we can, although the bigger flowers are going to have thicker stems so that they can hold themselves up. You might find it easier, like I just did, to switch the brush direction. You've kind of been seeing me do that. It's easier to use a brush in different directions than just try from one angle. It just gives your brain a chance to work it out. This one is going to come down. Ooh, I made that one really dark. Nice. This one's going to come down and connect with this one. Not really connect per se, but the stems are crossing if we were in nature, out in nature. That's why they look like that. So we might pull right up like this. And meet right in the middle. Nice. If you would like, you could add some little leaves onto your stems when you're finished. I'm not going to, but it's definitely a good idea if you'd like to give that a try. I'm gonna pull this down right to there. You can kind of see I'm not really pulling it down too far into the grass. I'm kind of letting it fade away as if the grass was in front of them. The next one kind of curves a little bit like this. Just a little tiny stem. I think I will try to pull this one in front of the grass a little bit so that it's just a little bit more interesting. It's always good to have different levels in your painting. Everything's all on the same plane, all on the same surface. It gets a little bit boring, kind of monotonous, but this way it just makes it a little more interesting. There we go. Do a couple more here. And we don't need to do the blue one on the end since the stem, since the base of the flower rather, is off the page, off the canvas. So we don't have to worry about that one. There we go. Excellent. I think now that my purple is starting to dry, and you can do this too if you'd like, I'm going to take a little bit of white just on its own and add some highlights to the purple flowers. This one especially is just striking me as a little bit flat. So I'm going to just add, kind of similar to what we did with the edge, just add some little white lines. There we go. That's a little bit more interesting. Excellent. We are nearing the end of our painting, so our last few steps, we are just going to need our little bitty brush. If you'd like, you can go ahead and wash up your other brushes now or wait until the end of class. It's up to you. I'm just going to keep going because, as I said before, this is such a great painting because we don't need to wait for it to dry, really. I think we'll start with our little white dots first, and then we'll move on to the yellow ones. Forgot the word. So these we're just going to kind of scatter around in here, but we don't want them to just be all over the place. We do, I don't know if you can really see here. I think it's okay. I think you can see it. Some of these flowers, these little white ones, even though they're just little dots, we did try to shape them along the same kind of lines as our larger flowers here, just to kind of keep with one sort of flower design. It just makes it look a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more like you meant to do it, rather than just sort of spraying white all over your canvas. And this reminds me too, we do need to add our last blue flower in as well. So we'll do that in a minute. But we can take the very end of our brush, the very back of it. We don't want to use the bristles, very back of the brush, to add in our little white dots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Looks like we've got about 8 of them. So it's up to you how many you want to add, but I'm going to put in about 8 flower dots. So there's probably have quite a few little dots all over your canvas, but we do want to try to keep them in that flower shape. There's one kind of up in the sky. I'm gonna wipe off the end of my brush. It's starting to not be quite so round. More over here. There we go. Awesome. So while I'm thinking about it, we're going to go back in and add that last blue flower. Nice and easy. Just take some blue and a little bit of white. We want the white in there because it'll help just make it a little bit less transparent over our green. We're going to put that one in right here. You could go off the edge too. A little extra white on top. Get rid of some of those green lines underneath. There we go. Excellent. We can go back to our little brush, make sure we dry off the end. And we're gonna do the same thing with some yellow dots. They're like little seed pods maybe, or farther away flowers, or just really little tiny ones. I think that's good enough for now. Now, our last step before we go in with our black is to do some of these little wisps. Now, we're going to take just a little bit of green. We're gonna mix some of our yellow into it to make kind of a nice light olive green. And just very carefully add some little wisps. And they don't really have to attach to the grass. These are sort of just little whimsical lines. Try to keep them pretty skinny. There we go. Whimsical little lines. So we'll want to wash that brush off. And we're gonna go ahead, I knew I had my black here somewhere, just a little bottle because we really don't need very much at all. We're gonna go ahead and very, 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 very carefully, I'm gonna start with the head. So make just a little round dot right there. We're gonna follow right along the body, with the wings rather, to make the body. Nice and skinny. And lift up very nice and gently to make it nice and skinny right at the end. I'm gonna do the same thing, really nice and skinny for the two antennas. There we are. So the last thing that we need to do before we're completely finished, wash off our brush, go in with a color of your choice. We usually suggest white or black. They're just nice neutral colors. I'm gonna use some white. You might not have any left over, so you can use some of that black since we really didn't use very much. And we're gonna add our initials, or you can add your last name if you'd like, right to one of the bottom corners. I think I'm going to do it in this bottom right one. I'm gonna put H-A-S for Hammar's Art Studio. All right, friends, we are all set and finished with our beautiful butterfly field, our lavender field, right? Awesome. I hope you guys all really enjoyed watching this video and following along with us. We really enjoy creating these, and it's been really awesome to be able to continue to work on some of our really amazing paintings with everyone from home. If you enjoyed this, please go to our YouTube channel. It's Hammar's Art Studio on YouTube. You can subscribe, and we've been trying to put out new videos every couple of days with tutorials like this. You can buy the kits on our website and follow right along, or if you have your own painting canvas at home, you can do that as well. It's a really awesome opportunity to be creative during this time and kind of experiment and explore with some things that you might not have done before, which is really, really great. It's awesome to be creative. So please stay tuned for more. We will be uploading more and doing a couple more events. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be able to be back in the studio soon. But I think we're going to try to keep doing some of these YouTube and virtual videos as well, virtual tutorials as well, because we've been reaching a really amazing audience of people that we haven't been able to reach in studio before. So that's really great. Have a great rest of your day, whatever time you're watching this at. I hope everyone has a really awesome springtime and had a really relaxing time painting with this. Hopefully the lavender will kind of stay within your painting and you'll walk by it every once in a while and get a nice relaxing whiff of lavender. as I said before, it's one of my favorite smells. So I was really, really excited to paint this with you guys today. So have a great rest of your day. We hope to see you back here in the studio soon, or virtually if we have to. This is one of the paintings that we're going to be doing probably around summer camp time, maybe earlier than that if we get a big request for it. But it's really, really lovely, kind of impressionistic like this as well, hula girl painting. And I think that one's going to be scented as well, but we'll keep that a secret for now. All right, everyone, I have to get going. But have a great rest of whatever day that you're watching this on, and we hope to see you soon. Keep painting, keep being creative, and everything else. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comments below or email us, info@hammersartstudio.com. We'll get back to you. And yeah, have a great day. Keep painting. We'll see you soon.